Hello everyone, welcome along to CPS. How are you all this evening? Hey, that's not bad. I'm quite impressed. Normally it's that kind of like, oh, no, you're here to entertain me. Welcome along. I don't have too much to say, which is great, having just talked for the last hour. I will just remind you all briefly to please check your mobile phones are on silent or turned off. For the tedious health and safety thing, if we have an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. It's about time. It's been years now. Come on, where's the next one? More importantly, there are fire escapes either side of the stage or out the door where you came in to our visitors. Do we have any other visitors here tonight? Welcome along, taxi service. For your benefit, yes. Exits either side of the stage, just in case. Toilets are in the far corner of the building. It's the last competition of the year this year. Coming up soon, we have the final monthly digital challenge, MDC 10, closing on the 30th of November, which is tranquil. Saw some lovely tranquil images in the Wild Child workshop, so unfortunately they weren't shot in November, so I have to go and take another one. For PSNZ, the last round of Canon Online closes December 25th. And for any of you who enter nationals and are PSNZ members, I don't know if you've read the latest camera talk, but there's some interesting news in there that PSNZ are moving to 4K for digital submissions from next year. So whatever that is, 4 times the resolution that we currently submit at. So that's an interesting change. As a print worker, I don't really care. Won't affect me, but that's great. MDC 9 closed 2 days ago. Get low. I think we'll see the results of that in the next week or two. Oh, we've already seen the results for it. Oh, okay. Oh, geez. You see, you guys are way more on top of this than I am. Sorry about that. So on to things that I vaguely do know about. Final night. Ian, where are you? Come and have a chat to people.
Thank you. A couple of other things rather than final night. I'm going to start them sequentially. Next week is the digital salon. James is going to talk to you about that later on. Those of you who went online to try and enter to the digital salon yesterday or the day before or so will have found that it's closed. That wasn't the plan. It's open again. So we've got a good number of entries, but if you've missed out because it was closed, it now isn't. So it'll close again on Sunday night. So that's the first thing. That's for next week. The week after that is the AGM. The AGM itself won't be particularly controversial. There's nothing we have to bring forward, so it's going to just be a structural process that goes through pretty quickly, but we do need a quorum, so please come along. And we're going to follow that up by showing the Creative Focus display, or, it's I think it goes for about 50 minutes of all the Creative Focus awards that went through in the Creative Focus competition this year. So if you haven't seen that, or you're a Creative Focusy sort of person, come along please to the AGM and just go aye quite a lot. That would be good. And then we're going to go flowing into the Creative Focus after that. A couple of things about final night. The planning's reasonably well underway for final night. Again, that'll be here. One thing that Rach did ask me to talk about, and that's the raffle. We had some feedback last year that the raffles took a bit too long, and we had some difficulty with some of the suppliers. There's a reluctance to do those sort of things, so we're trying to change it up a little bit. And we're going to do a sort of a Christmas hamper series of raffles. Probably have 3 Christmas hampers. Itself won't take very long, but there'll be Christmas hampers. Rach has put together a flyer to go out to everybody, but basically we're going to ask everybody to fill them up. So when you're doing some baking, make some extra Christmas mince pies and go and start on those now. And come together with that sort of thing. If you've got a bottle of wine you'd like to donate to go in one of the hampers, that would be good. Or could be some turkey, or even perhaps pork chops or whatever. Maybe not pork chops, but I did get it in. Just something to go in a Christmas hamper, and we're going to make up 3 Christmas hampers extravaganzas, which will be the raffles for final night. Other than that, the processing is going pretty well for final night. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. And I just want to say that we've got some amazing judges for the salon next week, and they are utterly uncorruptible and not able to be bribed at all. Broad hint. I'm now going to pass over to John for the main event, PI 10 results.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. As James alluded, this is our last open competition for the year. The judge for tonight is Alison Viskovic, judge for PI10. She's given me a bit of a bio, which I might shorten a little bit because it was quite long. So please bear with me. Alison started her photography in 1951 at the age of 10, giving a baby brownie when her family spent a year in the UK. Then at high school, Alison learned developing and enlarging, and for many years after that, she did family photos and rangefinder type camera and processed things through chemists. But since then, her photography has grown dramatically, and nowadays she enjoys doing projects around the Kapiti Coast area and working with local galleries where she shows sets from her club up in that area. Now, Alison gained FPSNZ in 2014 at the 3rd attempt, so there's an encouragement for you to keep going. And in 2019, she qualified as a PSNZ assessor. Alison's current interests include informal portraits, gardens, abstracts, and composite images such as kaleidoscopes, which I don't know really, we've seen too many of those. She does like to have a bit of fun with her photography. Unfortunately, travel photography has gone on the hold at the moment. In 2021, Alison held a retrospective exhibition at the Community Art Space Gallery in Paraparaumu. That was to mark her 80th birthday and 70 years of photography, so she's got a lot of experience. Tonight we have 40 images in the competition, of which 11 have been accepted, 4 high acceptance, 3 honours, and of course the 1 best in show, which is a 48% pass rate. I'll pass it over.
Am I working yet? Yep. Score 1, Christchurch Convention Centre, the new kid on the block. The contrasting large, darker and small lighter areas of this image have the potential for an interesting abstract composition, but for me, the difference feels unbalanced when I look at it for longer. I wonder if it would work better in the dark area were a bit lighter and the light area a bit darker. The focus is fine, and a lighter treatment could also show the herringbone pattern details to better advantage. Maybe the photographer could revisit in different lighting conditions when the main wall is better lit rather than in shadow. Monkey Mum. I see a formal central composition of a mother monkey with a child on her back against a background of logs and vegetation. Selective colouring seems to have been used to help the animal stand out, but I find the whole image rather dark. The mother's face is hard to see at normal screen brightness and could have been dodged a bit. The focus on the animals is sharp, but the front on view limits the amount of detail we can see. Side on, we would have seen more of the baby too. The mud walker. I like the idea of the silhouetted walker at the edge of the water, with the background lit by a sunset or sunrise. The different bands across the image make an interesting design, and the figure on one of the thirds has the space to walk into. The exposure seems suitable for the overall image, but I feel that the treatment is too contrasty. All the black dots seem distracting to me. A softer treatment might have more of an evening feel to it and still keep a silhouette. ICM, light through the trees. Here, camera movement has been to enhance the patterns in a linear scene of trees. The exposure and focus seems appropriate. Monochrome suits the subject, and there is a nice sense of distance. However, I find the lighter, streaky lines of the grasses between the tree shadows feel too busy and intrusive. For me, they really distract from the image as a whole. Score 1, Northern Giant Petrel at Kaikoura. The petrel is placed centrally in the image, with some clear water details in the foreground, while the less focused sea beyond provides a good background. Overall, exposure for the sea is fine, and well-lit areas of the petrel's back show clear feather details. But the shadowed areas facing the camera are less clear. It feels to me the shadow areas need to be dodged a bit because of the lighting direction. There is also no catch light in the eye, but I'm not sure how much choice the position the photographer had when shooting. Score 1, Nanny. I like this image of a goat's head. He has a really quirky expression on his face. The subject is well placed in the overall frame of the image, and the area is dark enough to see. The nose, eye, and horn are well focused. This looks to me like an experiment with high-key lighting, but some areas are overexposed, and so too many details have been lost. The old door. Here I see a formal composition with repeated vertical lines and panels, and a red door as the central main subject. The door and upper edge are in focus, but not the foreground grass at the foot. The overall impression feels washed out, except across the top. The photographer might consider reducing the brightness and adding contrast and saturation to get a bit more overall impact. Lots of potential in the subject. A song to impress the girls. Score 1. The well-lit parts of this image, especially the little bird, are sharp and well exposed, but the shadow areas have little detail. Maybe some dodging would have helped there. The clear background shows off the bird well, but I find the dark area of the branch distracting. I suggest the photographer could consider a vertical crop to emphasise the bird more and the branch less. Black and white, tack sharp car view. Taking a photo through a moving car's window can be difficult, as composition has to be rapid and instinctive. This view shows us an intersection with some sharp details on fixed things like poles, but some movement in other vehicles. This image is quite contrasty, with a large dark shadow in the foreground and bright whites on the poles and some buildings. Could be worth revisiting on the computer to reduce the shadow. Possibly changing to colour might help differentiate various components more clearly. Score 1, the captain. An interesting subject and angle of view, looking up at the statue through a frame of flowers. For me, there is a brightness issue. I feel the vegetation and the plinth of the statue could be lightened a bit and the sky burnt in a bit. I find the less focused, tall red blooms beside the well-focused main figure a bit incongruous and distracting. A pity the whole image was not sharp, as it is a well-seen subject. Forest impressions. I see a soft linear design based on forest trees, almost black and white, but with hints of green tones. The sort of composition has no specific centre of interest, so it depends on the overall effect, which in this case is not very dynamic. The exposure works for the trees, but I find the foreground vegetation across the foot too bright and distracting. Maybe burn it in more. Waiting for the master. The dog facing at us looks ready to engage, and we can assume it is keen to be out with its master. I feel that this shot might have been taken too quickly, and waiting to shoot might have shown more of the dogs. We see only a little of the second dog, and almost half of the door space is just dark. The white door frame and the wire grid are very eye-catching, but if the dogs filled the space more and the outer edging was cropped a bit, then the dogs would tell more of the story. Exposure and focus are suitable for the main dog, but the image is very contrasty and suggests to me that the flash was used. A well-seen opportunity worth revisiting, I think. Deep in thought. A striking nighttime image with two people sitting outdoors gazing at flaming torches or flares they are holding. Their heads appear to be lit by flash, and the rest of the scene by some source of red light. The faces and flares rather compete for attention. I wonder if a different point of view and a single light source might have made a more coherent image. Score 2. Deep Cove Shelter. A tranquil scene, well framed by the foreground rocks and the hills and reflections to each side. The boats provide interest and context on the centre line at one of the thirds. Exposure and focus well chosen. The shadowed hills on the right look rather blue-toned to my eye. New Zealand bush usually a slighter yellower green. There is a white edging on the upper edge of the hills, suggesting some over-sharpening. Mischief pending. An intriguing and dramatic composition. Strongly angled linear shapes lead the eye to the buoys. What looks like sky at first glance can't be because it has graffiti on it. The focus and exposure are fine for the main shapes and the buoys, but the larger wall areas feel overexposed. It could be worth revisiting and post-processing to have another try at how the brightest areas are treated. 2, but it's nearly a 3. Score 2. Daughter and mother at a muddy good run in Rangiora. A well-composed image of the two figures emerging from the net background, with a muddy foreground adding to the story. Exposure and focus are suitable for the situation. Oddly, I feel that their expressions look a bit bland, not particularly excited or reacting to the yucky mud. And the warm pinkish tones don't overall don't suggest awful muddy grime either. Dreamscape. Dreamscape is a nice title for this image. The misty tones, the linear bands of sky, the trees and watery reflections, and the slightly surreal pale violet tones to add to the effect. The little bird sitting, looking at the scene, adds a whimsical touch. Exposure and focus well suited to the subject. Score 2. Splashing, crashing. The title, Splashing, Crashing, does describe what I can see in this image, yet somehow the linear composition across the image does not feel very dynamic. The overall exposure and focus are suitable, but maybe a bit more contrast and more detail in the shadowed area on the left-hand wave might add some more impact. A well-seen subject worth revisiting. Singapore at night. An interesting view of part of the city at night, with the lights of tall buildings standing out against the dark areas. The foreground church makes an interesting contrast to the newer buildings, and the spire balances the tall building on the left side. Focus and exposure are suitable for the situation, but without the title, I would not have known this was Singapore. Hoek van Holland. The stark landscape and building make an interesting subject. Overall exposure and focus are fine, but I suggest dodging the stronger shadows areas a bit. I like the compositional balance across the scene between the posts and the building. The photographer could try cropping the top and foot of the image a bit for even more bolder linear design. Isle in the Mist. A softly pleasant scene of trees on a small island in a mist. The trees are well focused and stand out from the mist, but their reflections in the foreground feel rather pale. I wondered if they had been held back to suggest more mistiness. The composition has a formal balance between the main trees, which suits the calm overall mood. Score 3, first of the acceptances. Forgotten Pier. A well-arranged and captured still life of an ageing pier and a walnut. The background provides an effective frame and soft contrasting colour, and I like the little detail of the reflection of the pier. The side lighting brings out texture, and overall exposure and focus have been well chosen. I might dodge the shadows a bit on the right side of the image, but I think the image works well as a whole. Skinny's Last Race. Without the title, this image could be an abstract design or perhaps a fluttery bird of some sort. As an image of a moving motorcyclist, it does give a dramatic sense of movement, though no clues from the context suggest that this is a specific person or race. Technically well handled for this type of moving image with some dynamic shapes in the composition. Girl from Krong Kampong Cham, Cambodia. I really like the way the window has been used as a frame for this young woman, and the way she leans out gives more dynamic lines than a straight-on view would have. The side lighting gives texture to her clothes and hair and shape to the facial features. I wonder if some post-processing has been used to strengthen the detail of the woman, as she looks quite contrasty given the overall lighting of the surrounds. I also find the colour on the exposed lower arm overdone. A strong portrait overall, interesting to compare this with the other portrait of a young woman, very different, but both work well for the approach taken by the photographers. Rounding the Boy. I like the combination of neon monochrome for the background and colour for the main subject. The rider and machine have been frozen in action at a dynamic angle with sharply focused details. While the frozen spray shows just how much movement is going on, this has a strong feeling of excitement. I was going to score this a 4, but notice that there are some white edges that suggest over-sharpening. Hoarfrost Serenity. A well-titled image that certainly suggests serenity. Interesting composition. It has formal balance vertically with the line of trees and their reflections, but informal balance horizontally with the stronger tree to one side. The hints of colour add to the overall effect of simplicity, and technical details have been handled well. Spot for a rest. I think the overall design of this image is really intriguing. It has two main areas, the floor with the strong receding linear shapes and the wall with the brick and window details. Then there are those two areas that are linked by the two chairs. Their legs echo the angled lines and their woodwork echoes the lighter tones of the wall. Exposure and focus are fine. This is a well-produced image. The subject was well seen. Nature in a teacup. I see the very attractive image that has been constructed to illustrate the idea of nature in a teacup. Some of this will have been done when photographing the elements, and some when combining in post-processing. Exposure, focus, and design all well handled, and the image is set off nicely by a muted background, a 3, but nearly a 4. Look up. I find this a nice example of an architectural shot that becomes a well-designed image. The monochrome treatment and tapering perspective works well. The focus, exposure, and contrast level is spot on. And the angled cloud lines add variety of softer texture in the upper part of the image. Reaching for the sky. I like the soft, warm autumn colours in the trees, water, and the flight of stairs. The way the lighting plays across the stairs suggests they are really there, not inserted later. I can't tell if they are real or not, and it doesn't matter. I just like the whimsical effect. Overall exposure and focus are appropriate, but for me, my taste, the shadows on the left side could be dodged a bit. An effective image to remember. Jacinda. A very attractive portrait of a young woman with soft lighting, but enough to bring out shapes and textural details. I like the direct stance and gaze, engaging with the photographer and viewer. Focus and exposure were well chosen, but I feel the little bit of jeans showing on the lower edge should either show more or should be cropped out. As it is, it's almost a distraction. Interesting to compare this with the other portrait of a young woman. Very different, but both work well for the approach taken by the photographers. Dusk reflection. Although this seems a rather linear design across the image, the contrasting light, colours and shapes in the band of mountains and clouds provide a dynamic effect. Overall exposure and focus is well chosen. The photographer might consider cropping some of the dark base of the image a bit. And score 4, Impressions of Italy. I like the way the 3 walls provide a sense of enclosure within the square frame, then the contrast of the black silhouette of the lamp and its support. The soft warm tones of the walls have interesting variations of colour and brightness. The different shutters provide interesting details. I have one quibble. The hanging wire that stops at the base of the image catches my eye. It's a pity it does not meet the wall to make a more complete shape to echo the bracket above, or else clone it out. Wood impression. I really like the simplicity of line and the strong contrast in this image. The glow of some blue light in the distance to the right seems to add a sense of mystery, and the contrast to the warm dark browns in the main area. I think the photographer's choice of exposure time has worked well, and there is also a good sense of depth of distance in this image. Very effective overall. Watching. A quirky image. I rather like the idea of a watcher whose eyes are hidden by the frame of the window. He is looking up or down, through. The window also makes an overall frame for the image. The focus is sharpest on the dark inner frame, the man's figure and the raindrops on the glass. The distance is less focused and a bit misty, suiting the overcast day. Yes, the sky is quite bright, but it's like that on that sort of a day. Overall, the exposure feels just right, an image that leaves a bit to the viewer's imagination. White-faced heron at Kaiteriteri. You could say it's just a white-faced heron on a grey day on a mud flat, but I think it's a lovely view that concentrates on the bird with its subtle details of plumage and more contrast around the face and beak. It feels as though it has an attitude. The subject is well placed in the frame, and the small area of reflection plus that out of focus distance gives a sense of depth. Focus and exposure are spot on. And score 5, making a splash. An intriguing image that has me wondering how it was done. Though it's the finished effect that matters, of course. The design is formal and central, so our attention goes to the central column and the little umbrella-like shape around it. I do like the effect of the different light sources, greener on one side and warmer on the other. Focus, exposure and timing have been well handled, and the details of various parts of the liquid are well caught. Paragliding in Palouse. This image has a lovely sense of warmth and calm. There is a backdrop of rolling low hills side lit by near sunrise or sunset. Then poised in front is the paraglider, suspended from a bright but softly shaped parachute. The way he's sitting, ankles crossed, is as though he's relaxing in an armchair. There is a sense of stability, no rush for anything to happen. Time has paused. Focus and exposure are spot on. A very effective image overall. Giant dahlia. This is a beautiful treatment for a single dahlia flower. It is placed centrally against a blurred, warm, brown-toned background. Side lighting brings out texture details in the petals, but the stem is merged with the background. The subtle colour of the flower is well caught. A very good example of a still life image where the photographer can control all the parts of the arrangement, lighting, camera, and then processing. I would happily have this image on my wall. And score 6, best in show. Black Falcon's aerobatic mayhem. There is real drama here, both in action recorded and the dynamic visual shape formed by the intersecting aeroplanes. The backgrounds of smoke masking part of the ground and further hills add to the context. The exposure and focus are just right, and light and shade on the metal wings give the planes a strong sense of solidity. I commend the photographer on catching everything at the right moment, and this is certainly best in show for me.
You met. Thank you, Nicola. There's a number of you've done this year for me. Thank you very much. Right. The first acceptance is Forgotten Pear by Raywin White. Right, sorry. Skinny's Last Race by John Thornton. Girl from Krong Kompong Chang, Cambodia, Alistair Phillips. And Rounding the Boy by Anne Yuan. This is Hoarfrost Serenity by Sue Coombs. Oh, didn't see her hiding in the background. Next one is Spot for a Rest by Nola Summer. Nature in a Teacup by Dawn Kirk. And we have Look Up by Irene Ferguson. Now Reaching for the Sky by John McCall. Now we have Jacinda by Calvin Aird. And this is A Dusk Reflection by J.K. Q. Where's he? Oh, he was here before. Impressions of Italy by Nelson Boosted. Now we have Wood Impression by Fritzof Mortensen. This is High Acceptance. Watching by Joe Curtis. And we've got White Faced Heron at Kaiteriteri by Bonnie Steskamp. And the first of our honours is Making a Splash by Jane Barnes. The next is Paragliding in Palouse by Ron Willems. And we have A Giant Dahlia by Diane Kelsey. And of course, Donna's and Beston's show is A Black Falcon's Aerobatic Mayhem by Alan Moore. Now, Alan's going to tell us a little bit about his picture.
Well, that was taken at Wanaka 4 years ago. The exposure was, I just looked it up, so it was an 800th of a second at f5.6, and the ISO was 160. It's a crop of the left-hand side of the image. There were another 2 aeroplanes out the other side, cropped and sharpened and denoised and gigapixeled in Topaz, and then went back into Photoshop and removed all the halos, and I thought that looks pretty good. But I did wonder. I'm quite surprised, really. I really like the image, but I thought it's a matter of taste. I was in Wanaka at the airfield. I was on the ground. Yeah, right in front, right by the fire engine. Yeah, there was a group of us there. Yeah, so. Well, a big long lens, 800 to 400 more lens, yeah. And, so. If I'd looked up and seen who the judge was, I might not have entered it, because the last time she judged an image of mine, I got a 1, and it was 2 pictures from the same air show, 2 aeroplanes from the same air show, so. So, but yeah. So that's a nice surprise.
Thank you, Alan. Next one is Jane.
Okay, for those who need to know, because none of the judges so far have, it's a water drop. But it's done through a bubble because, of course, the water's wet, goes through the bubble, and the bubble stays intact until it eventually dissolves. So it's lit with 2 flashes, one with a red filter, one with a red filter, one with a green filter, and the yellow is the combination of the colours. So I had lots of fun.
Well done. Bonnie, do I come to you or you come to me?
So we always go up to Kaiteri every holiday. And yeah, just saw that little heron and took a photo. I think I might have had my speed on quite fast. I was probably trying to get him in flight, but he didn't want to fly. So yeah, I was really pleased to get a 4.
Thank you. What's off? Haven't seen you for a while.
Yeah, that was at the winter school in that little wood in the morning. It was pretty much done as I shot it. A little bit more contrast in the frame around it. Yes, I experimented a little bit with the ICM, which I haven't done that much before. So just vertical movement and yeah, try to get the timing right. So to have the movement, and then I had it, I think, with a 2-second delay, so that I have the movement when the shutter already started. So that worked pretty well.
Nelson?
Yeah, I've come to the conclusion over the last couple of years that you're allowed to change things in a photograph and put things in, take things away. The building on the right was in bright sunshine and it was completely overexposed for the photograph. So I selected it and coloured it in.
Very good. Are there any more 4s? Oh, he's not here. We'll stop there.
Thank you, John. Ooh, blimey. Thank you, John. That brings us to the end of the evening. It's a short and sweet one this evening. However, we have supper tonight for the first time in a little while. So the reason I'm telling you mostly about supper is the dishwasher is broken. So if you want to come and have supper, that would be awesome, but you have to wash your own cup. And that will be through there in just a couple of minutes. So I'll just finish off by saying thank you to everyone who's been involved in putting tonight on. Andrew and Wayne doing sound, lighting, all internet-related things in the back corner. Ian and Alistair on projection, Dennis on opening and closing. Thank you, Dennis. The entire exec on meet and greet. It was convenient having your committee meeting in the foyer. And the tutorial, everyone who did the Wild Child workshop. So thank you for bringing your images. This is my last time as MC for CPS for a while. It's not. I'm going to be in Mount Bora paragliding on the 3rd of December, so I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Thank you for tolerating my random gibberish for the last few years. And let's go and have a cup of tea.